Hello, I am back. My name is Star Thinker, also known as Randy Pischel. My voice is kind of hoarse. I just spent a couple days under the weather. I had a severe reaction to one of my meds, and it literally laid me out. But I'm back, and I'm here to talk about a few things. I did find an anomaly in the Niamo Speck cipher video, and I was going to discuss that. I haven't looked at that too much. I did take another gander at that when I started to recover. I got Michael behind me licking his belly. and, but I was gonna start with the Blackbeard treasure, and this thing rang bells with me for one reason, and it's because of some inside information I had on Michael Stather's hunt. So let me go through this. This is the treasure trove. If you don't know, I'm going to go to the snail page, and I was the snail winner. And this is something, I don't know if this would appeal, or who this would appeal to, because it's a simple code. Now in the story itself, there's the protagonist, his name's Zach, and he's told, I think it was in a dream sequence, to make a box with 25 boxes in it, which is a polybia square. And then it's also hinted, normally in a polybia square you combine the I and the J, but it was hinted to instead remove the Q. So using these Qs, you can construct a polybia square with the I and the J in separate boxes, but you remove the Q because you have 25 boxes but 26 letters of the alphabet, so you have to accommodate that extra letter somehow. But nowhere in this book will you find a letter Q, and that was one of the clues to take out the Q. So, and people have transcribed this book, and there's just literally no letter Q's in it. And then, so what do you do with a polybia square? You need pairs of numbers up to 5. So you're looking for things that you have 5 of that are repeated. I don't know if I can do this right. So this is the snail page, and if you look closely, I'll go into the bottom here, you see these circles, and there's 5 different types of circles, and they all go along these branches, and that's the one I spotted. And I wrote down, I just assigned a number to each different type of circle, and I wrote it all out, and then I paired them off, like 1, 5, and once you pair them off and they come out even, you're even closer. And then I solved it to Anita State Park, and of course I was really shocked because I live about an hour and a half from Anita State Park, and this was a nationwide hunt, so I was like, ooh, Anita State Park is like right down the road from me. So I had to wait for my son to get out of school, and we took off and went down there. Another thing that helped was, if you look here, there's a fairy, and she's got her arms outstretched, and I don't know if you can tell, but there's black vines and green vines, and the green vines, it's staying blurry, it's not focusing. I'll bring it over this way. There we go. The green vines are actually a map of Anita State Park, and where her finger's pointing, there was a parking lot. So we knew Anita State Park. We had a map of the park, and we were told to go to the parking lot. From there was my son, who, and I don't have a picture of the tree for this video, but he noticed that there's a picture of this tree, and that looks exactly like the tree that had the token in it. So we had all the elements were there. It was very easy once you figured it out. And I'm telling you, people were talking about, oh, the Fen Finder is waiting to make a movie or something. I'm like, if you want to make a movie, this is the hunt to make a movie about. Now this came out at a time when there was no big treasure hunts going on, and it sold over 1 million copies. And there are stories, because there was 13 different people that found it, and Michael Stather was shocked at that. He thought one person would solve this and maybe find 10 or 11 of them, and maybe 1 or 2 other people would get to the other ones. But he was shocked because everyone shared their answers. And he didn't think people would do that. He thought people would be greedy and keep everything to themselves. But because everyone shared their answers, there was a different finder for each token. And I know one finder like was flat broke, and he was begging his parents and his friends, and he gathered up enough money to get a bus ticket. He went to the nearest bus station and then walked to the park, and he found the token. I mean, that's a cool story. There's a story of one of the trees was the hole was like 6 feet off the ground, and there was no bottom. And the park ranger saw these people standing around this tree trying to figure out what to do, and they were like, not in my park, and they put a fence around the tree, and so they came up with a mutual solution. But they took a long extension cord and a shop vac and actually dropped the nozzle of the shop vac into the tree, and they vacuumed up the bottom of the tree, and sure enough, the token fell into the shop vac, and there you go. And then there's the Pook story where everyone knew where it was. They estimated over 1,000 people visited the park in Michigan, and they knew it was in a numbered campsite in this park, and the trees were all cut down around this campsite. So everyone's like, oh well, the Pook tree is obviously gone. And these people were walking home. It was pouring down rain. The road was muddy, and they saw the glint of gold in the mud in the road, like right in the middle of the road. And they picked it up, and it was the Pook token. So the tree had been cut down and moved, and at some point the token fell out while the tree was being transported, and it fell in the middle of the road, and who knows how long it had laid there. You know, the trees had been cut down weeks earlier. So there's cool stories here, and when I think about the Fenn treasure compared to this one, there was a computer programmer who took his numbers and he plugged them into a computer program because his numbers were kind of jumbled, and it came up with the name of a park. I see a foot sticking up behind me. And he came up with the name of a park and from his computer, and so there's all these cool stories, and I think that would make a better movie than just one person looking for Forrest Fenn. But that was the way this hunt worked, and like if you look at the colors and the border, and that's steganography. So once you knew that you had to build a polybia square, then it was a matter of finding your 1s and 5s to plug into it, and that was part of the steganography. This book is just full of pictures, and every picture was like had something in it that you could count to 5 on, and then all the drop caps were maps of the park, and then the ferries were pointing. You can see every ferry was pointing to a spot. So it's kind of neat and well thought out, and it followed rules, which I always tell people. And but there were mistakes in it. He spelled the name of a couple parks wrong, and people were like, "Is that a clue? Is that a clue?" And when I was talking with him, and he's like, "No, I just spelled the name of the park wrong." And so it was just, hey, it was a mistake. But people still found the token, so that was fine. So when the second book came out, right here. The second book was a treasure trove, The Secrets of the Alchemist's Star, and again, it was very full of pictures. And with this book, Michael approached Simon & Schuster, and he said, "Hey, you guys can distribute a book better than I can. I sold 1 million copies of this last book. This book is going to do twice that. I'm going to sell 2 million copies." He was the salesman, and Simon & Schuster agreed to distribute the book, and the book petered out at like 500,000 copies. That Simon & Schuster had spent more than that trying to sell this book and distributing it and getting it into bookstores. And so they sued Michael Stather. And if you're a treasure hunter, you've probably heard about Simon & Schuster suing Michael Stather and winning. And when they won, they got property of the entire hunt. They got property of the book, of the solves, of the prizes. The prizes, no one ever admitted where the prizes were. But this book did not have boots on the ground. And so what was the difference between the first book and the second book? And this is exactly being mirrored today with the end of the Forrest Fenn hunt. So the first book ended. The first book was like at a time there was a drought of good treasure hunting books, and he marketed it to the layperson, not just the treasure hunting group. So it sold. Everyone was caught up in this. But you know, if you think about it, he might have sold 1,000,000 copies, but there was probably only a couple thousand people actually working on the puzzles. And when that book ended, just like when Forrest Fenn's book ended, people came out with their own hunts. There was just this glut of hunts. Some of them were solved quickly, some of them got closed down because they realized they made mistakes. And it's just the same as what's happening now. And then the second book came out and people were burned out. But more importantly, I think, and I'm pretty darn sure K-Pro will agree with me, is the book is divided in two parts. And my copy is like, I have a good copy of this somewhere, but you have to take it apart. There's parts of this book where there are circles, and you had to like cut them out and overlay them. There's each page had a bigger and bigger circle on it, but right in the middle, and this is kind of famous amongst treasure trovers, they have what's called the big block of code. Big block of code is literally a big block of code. Now I have my own solve for this, and this goes on for page after page after page. That's why it's called the big block of code. But I noticed right off the bat, and no one would believe me, and without the solves, I mean, Simon Schuster never released what the answer to these puzzles were. So if you look, there are moons. They call them moons in rectangles, but you see these brown dots. They're small brown dots, and nowhere in this puzzle, and right there's two close together, and nowhere in this puzzle are there two dots over top of each other. They're strung out in each line, and if you look, like, let me get it in focus here. There's lots of places where there's moons and big dots and other things over top of each other, but the brown dots were always strung out. So I think the brown dots were the code, and the other things were the dressing around the code. But whatever it was complicated. We know you had to learn this number system because he created a whole new number system using moons. And I think it went to 13. It was a 13 base number system. I can't recall. It was either 9 or 13. So you had to learn a base 13 number system, and you had to apply it to the big block of codes. And there was other places where you had to apply this number system. And it was just never solved. I mean, it just was a lot more complicated. And so I think people who were on the fence on the first one, because like I said, he sold 1,000,000 copies, but I don't think there was 1,000,000 people working on the puzzles, because it's just a fun story anyway, and it's got beautiful pictures in it. And then this one, first of all, the pictures were drawn by different artists, so they looked different and they didn't quite match. And then these big blocks of code, I think a lot of people just instantly turned off. They just shut down and said, no, I'm not even going to figure that one out. Because there was hardly anything in the book that told you what to do with these big blocks of codes, other than there was a lot of palindromes, which is something read forward and backwards equally. You know, if you flip it around, it reads the same thing. And it just petered out. So he could not sell 2,000,000 copies. He sold about 500,000. And then when the hunt ended, of course, no more were sold after that. But when I saw this Blackbeard hunt, it was $10 million, and they were selling like $50 maps and stuff. I thought, there's no way they're going to make their money on this. And that was like the very first thought. If someone who had a successful hunt can't follow that up with another successful hunt, and this was coming after Forrest Fenn, right on the heels of, and there's just no way they're going to recoup $10 million. And who knows how long that time span was. I think someone worked out the math of how many maps they would have to sell at $50 a piece. But there's just not that much interest. And to think people were investing in this as an investment, you know, when you invest, you want a return. You want an increase coming back. It just did not ring true. And there was some other red flags, and they've been talked about. You know, people can't track down who started this. People insinuated that other people were involved that weren't involved. There was no one could find the LLC paperwork for the company. I gotta plug my phone in. It's gonna die before my video's done. And all these other things. So it's like there was just a lot of red flags, and then they gave out the wrong maps, and then they blamed it on a server being down, and I don't know, there was just a lot of weird things going on with that. And so to me, knowing what I know about how this hunt failed and seeing how they tried to do their hunt, it just did not ring true. And the other thing I was going to bring this back around to Naomi Speck, and I always assume it's a woman because I know Naomi's, I know at least 3 or 4 Naomi's for some reason. And this is Naomi Speck, so I just, in my mind, it's a woman, but it could be a guy, but I'm going to refer to her as she. So when I was looking at this, I zoomed in on the letters that had stuff in the middle of them, and I'm going to show you what I found here. And keep in mind that I've been scrutinized every typo in my book, every time the paragraphs didn't align with the margin, every time something happened. I've had people write me saying, is this part of a clue? Is this a clue? Is this a clue? And so I know what it's like to be scrutinized. So Miss Speck, I apologize. I'm just scrutinizing this, and this is what I found. Okay, so what I did was I opened this in the standard Microsoft Photo Viewer, and this will only enlarge so far. But as a lot of you probably already notice, if you do enlarge it, and you look at the numbers that were filled in, you can see the original number has been anti-aliased. I mean, it's blurred with the rest of the picture, and then this, you can see the sharp zigzags and stuff, so that's that was added later. You can see how sharp that is compared to the number. It really stands out here, but you can see this is a perfectly straight line, and this is, everything else is blurred. Another place, again there, another place this really stands out is here. You have the 6, and then they added this tail. You can see this has been anti-aliased. It's been smooth, you know. And again, we got this expanded fully, and you can see that these have been added after the picture was made. Now, not that this helps you solve the poem or anything, but I've discovered a couple more places where that has happened. And let me come over here. I gotta find it. I missed it somewhere. Well, where did you go? Here we go. So right here, if you look at the 7, again, it's all blurry. It's got blurry edges. And this 7 is nice and clear. It's got nice, crisp, straight, dark edges. So this 7 was added after the picture was done. And I don't think they covered a number, like if they added error, like maybe this was a 6 and they needed it to be a 7. Excuse me. But if you look at the background, you can see these lines, because it's like an antique paper. And you can see these lines are continuous. They go right through the 7, and they go straight down. So I think this spot was left blank until everything was done, and then the 7 was added on top of that. I don't think anything was masked out. You know, like that was a different number, and it masked it out. You would see that, and I'll show you that in a second. But obviously this 7, and they left the space there, so it's not like this was a 1 and they moved everything else down. All these lines line up perfectly. But a space is left there, and about those, you know, and you can see the jagged lines here and the dark. And the same thing here, jagged. They tried to smooth it a little bit, but it's still not matching. And this just happens to be next to another 7, so you can plainly see that they don't match. But like I said, I don't see anything masked out here. So this was a space that was added. So they probably didn't know what number to put here. until everything was finished. And then they put that number here. And then let me show you one more thing. I found the same thing with this 5. This 5 has obviously been added after the fact, but there's a difference with this 5. If you try to follow these lines down, you'll see they get really blurry. There's blotch marks. It's hard to follow. You can almost follow this white line through, but right here and in here, I'm thinking something might have been masked out of this one, and then the 5 added. So I think this was to correct something or change something. Now, it might have been added at the same time as the 7, but I just don't see. If you zoom out, it's almost clear. You zoom out, you can see that these lines do not go all the way through the number like on that 7. If you look at this 7, now this is an original 7, and you can see how the lines, you can see them going all the way through on all these numbers. But on here, there's just a big blurry area. I'm almost thinking, due to the shape of this, it might have been a 6, and they changed it to a 5. So they might have just got their numbers out of order and then went back to correct it. Because this hoop here would have matched the hoop of a 6, but they had to mask out where the back of the 6 was. So, like I said, this doesn't really help solve anything, and those are the only instances I can see of that. I've gone through everything, and this 7 was the one that jumped out at me first because it just happened to be next to another 7. And I thought, I wonder if that's anywhere else. And other than what was colored in these, I don't see any more. So like I said, I think this was a 6 that was corrected to a 5. I don't really see how that could be a different number. There's just the way that's blurred. I think they blurred out a 6 and put a 5 on top of it. But this here, you could, especially when you zoomed out like this, you can plainly see these lines go straight through. So I think this space was left blank, and the 7 was added. And not that any of this helps you solve the poem. It might just be an insight into the author, but I was looking. I know some people were posting. To me, it's pareidolia, but like they were posting what they see in these opals. I do notice one was round, one was a little bit of oval, one's a definite oval. So I don't know if maybe that has anything to do with it. And again, like I said, I've seen people analyze the music, and there are drum beats. I think it was in 2 sets of 6 or 2 sets of 6 or 7. But there are drum beats in the music. But then she links to this, so this makes me believe that maybe you don't need the music if you just had this. Another thing I did was like go down the sides. This is just an antiquing, like an antiquing template. I didn't see anything around the sides. It showed that like maybe the sides are sculpted, because that would be a good place to put in Morse code or anything else like that. But that just looks like the edge of the template. There's no anomalies that I can find around the edge. So anyway, just some curiosity, some curious observations. I know in the description she put that, I'm assuming it's a she, that she put that nothing else is needed. So I know this just reeks of a Beal cipher, and every time I look at it, I think it's a Beal cipher with a 65 character phrase or 65 letter phrase. But then she said that nothing else was needed. Everything is right here. So I started going that route to see if I could pull another code out of here, and that's when I noticed the 7 and the 5. But I'm going to go ahead and log this off. I also wanted to add, if you look at this 17 and this 17 compared to this 17, you can see this big space here. What's called kerning. So this 7 was definitely added after the fact, because it doesn't space like the regular 17s. The 5 does, however, if you look at that 25 and this 25, it does look pretty normal. So that's why I think this is covering up a 6, because they matched the curve with the curve of a 6. And so the kerning, in fact, zoomed out like this, I can still almost see a line right here where there was a 6. But I just wanted to point out that was another thing in favor of that 7 being added, was the big space. They got the up and down right, but they should have moved it over a little bit to make it less noticeable. But once you zoom in, that became noticeable. So as you can see, there was just 2 numbers that were added after the fact. I think one was a correction and one was an addition. So like I said, I don't know if that has any bearing on, in fact, I don't think it'll help you solve anything, but it's just a curiosity that I spotted. And I'm just wondering too, I keep saying it's a Beal cipher because it has numbers up to 65, and that's very indicative of a Beal cipher, is you have a high number of numbers. But she stated in her remarks that there is nothing else needed, and so I've kind of changed my tact. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to take her at her word that nothing else is needed. So what kind of code uses 65 numbers? And so I'm exploring that aspect of it, and that's when I spotted the 7 and the 5, and I thought, that 7 was added. There was a space left for that 7. So what? And I know this is boots on the ground. Once you solve it, it takes you to a location. And then I came up with some other ideas that I'm going to try. Like I said, I've been very ill, and it took the doctors a while to figure out that. Yeah, it's funny because I was having actually the overdose reaction to the pills when I wasn't overdosing. That's why the reaction was so severe, and I was all cold. And I'm manly enough to admit well, maybe I shouldn't admit this, but part of the reaction of this pills that cause hallucinations, it causes confusion. I couldn't go to work for a couple of days. I mean, it was just really, really bad. And I kept having these fever dreams. And I had this dream that I was in a chicken restaurant in the middle of a desert, and Kaulazars walked in selling cassette tapes of that song he plays at the beginning of his dreams. And I was like, all right, I'll buy one of your cassette tapes. And he's like, no, I'm out. And he turned around and walked out. And I'm like, okay, so I had a dream about Kaulazars. It was just really weird. But keep in mind, it was a fever-induced overdose dream from a drug I probably shouldn't have started. I just think it's funny because it was so vivid. It was him. He walked in selling these cassette tapes. And it was just like a scene from the 70s or something. And then when I walked up, I said, fine, I'll buy one. He's like, I'm out. And he just turned around and walked out. So it's just, I don't know, maybe I harbor some weird feelings there, but it was just a funny part of my dream. Oh, and there's Michael. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I just thought I'd point that out. And this is what I predicted way back, a couple videos back. I was like, there's a glut of hunts, and they're just going to all step on each other, and they're just going to all kind of ruin each other. And some were solved so quickly. I remember the one hunt, I thought, okay, I watched it. I thought, okay, well, I'll go to work and maybe I'll download the information on it. When I got to work, it was solved. I mean, it was like 4 hours or something. And then the other hunts that were solved in 4 days, and some of these didn't last very long. And then there's other hunts that are still, this one I'm still working on. But all these hunts are, because I'm working on this one, I'm like, oh God, I just heard about 3 more, and I'm like, do I look at these 3 more? And then the Michigan hunt came out, and there was some questions on that, and I haven't heard what the controversy was. I heard there was something going on with the first hunt, but I haven't heard what that is yet. So it's just like, people stop and think. I mean, it took me years and years and years to come up with a way to do a hunt that didn't put people in danger, that had people think. and didn't involve destroying anything or digging or anything like that. And it's not just a simple thing you can come up with overnight. And so just everyone needs to just chill out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all these hunts. I'm just curious because like the red flags for me on that Blackbeard hunt wasn't the same red flags other people had, and so I'm just curious to see what comes of that. And I thought there was going to be a live stream last night, and I wouldn't have remembered it if there was, because I was like on the floor hallucinating. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. There's Michael. Oh, Michael. Michael's the male cat. Phoebe is sleeping up there, and of course you can't pet her when she's sleeping, otherwise you might lose a finger. But just a few things that I'm throwing out there. And again, if you're gonna make a movie out of the treasure trove, because that was just such a fun thing. I have all the treasure trove, but this is the solution book, and he also put out 2 books of codes, and I've been buying those up, like that hunt in Illinois, is it Illinois or Indiana, where they have a map and then they have a companion book about the companion book. So I just want to see what people are saying about codes, and they're right, but there's more to it than that. So yeah, just like the Polybia square and a treasure trove, it's a Polybia square, but it wasn't a standard Polybia square. You had to know what to modify. Curious point though, up to the letter I, the Polybia square would work. So you would start getting letters and words and things that made sense, but then you would get some gibberish at the end, and for some letters, and so it might throw you. But the guy with the computer program didn't even need that. He just plugged everything in and it spit out a name of a park. He's like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to that park. But yeah, there's just so many stories associated. There's people that went to the Dakotas and they got out, and at that point they knew they were looking for trees. And so they get out and they look around and they said there's only one tree in view all the way to the horizon in every direction. You're like, well, guess that's the tree. So they like just walked up and found it. They didn't even have to look for maps of the park or anything. It was just like, there's nothing but flat grasslands and there's one tree, and that's where he threw the token in. So yeah, there's a lot of cute stories with this. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll look at Michael, and then I'm going to get some rest because I'm still kind of reeling. I've just had a shower, my first shower in a couple days, and I got to go to work tonight. So I'm going to try and relax and take care. And these are just some of my observations, and they're my opinions, and they're not to be construed as absolute facts. Some of them are. But anyway, I'll talk to you later.